sent me an inbox message essentially. Well, actually, he had posted a question on Facebook, and I didn't answer. It was about where he should go for vacation. And I didn't answer it because like I don't really know him that well to be giving him suggestions, and so I kind of bypassed it. And later on that night, that same question popped back up in my news feed, but I could see his comment. It seemed like people were giving him suggestions, and he said, "I'm waiting for someone specific to respond."
He applied pressure, didn't he?
Well, we have not had any conversation, so I don't know why in my mind I thought, oh, he's waiting for me to respond.
Wow.
And he was waiting for me to respond, and I responded, and I was like, and so my response was, "How are you gonna tell everybody no? How are you gonna ask for suggestions and then tell everybody no, right?" So we had a little dance back and forth, and then it led to an inbox message. He was still in St. Louis at the time. I live in Atlanta. And we kind of started chatting back and forth. And by the end of that weekend, we had exchanged numbers. I don't even know if it was the weekend, like the next day we exchanged numbers and started chatting. And this was at the top of November. And by Thanksgiving, he came to visit me in Atlanta and was like very serious about his pursuit and intentions and everything very quickly. So that's how we met. But I was comfortable knowing whose brother he was, and even though I didn't know him, I had a good understanding of his family.
Okay. What made him? Did he ever open up about what made him pursue you so quickly and with such aggression?
So I don't think he thought it felt like aggression. I think from the time that we had interacted on Facebook like earlier in the summer, it wasn't very often. It wasn't like we were interacting daily or anything like that. It was just kind of comments here and there. I think from looking at my page and just those interactions, he felt like, she's interesting. She has something to say, and she's playful, and she has conversation. And I think that was enough for him to want to get to know me more. And the banter that came from that conversation about where he should go on vacation, I think because it led to conversation, we actually had something to say to each other. It was quick-witted and fast and interesting that I think he was like, okay, let's keep the conversation going. He's always been very clear on what he wants. And so I think it was just a matter of, okay, this is what I want. What am I hemming at? There's no need to hem and haw about
it. Okay. So how long did he give himself to heal before he started to pursue you from his first wife?
So his first wife, her name's Deira. Unfortunately, she had succumbed to cancer. And she had lived with cancer for the greater part of their 10-year marriage. It was a long battle and process. And he grieved her not from the moment that she was diagnosed, but at the moment of decline that was seemingly like she wasn't going to get past this hurdle. At the point that I think she was in hospice for a little while, or toward the end of her life. And so he tells it as like around February of the year that she passed in 2014, that he had, kind of, I don't want to say made peace with it, but was watching this decline. He was taking care of her in his home and all of that, in their home until her last breath. And when she passed in June, and him and I met in November, I think my first question was like, are you ready? Like, that seemed my preconceived notions about what it means to grieve a spouse meant years and years of therapy and crying. And like, if you were married for 10 years, you need 10 years to get past it. You need all of this time. But he had talked very openly about grieving, counseling. He had done grief share, and his philosophy or his thinking very early on was, she's not coming back, and I fulfilled my vows, so I don't owe anybody like an amount of time to be single in that way. Not that he was just trying to get married, but he was very sober minded about the idea of I can move forward with my life and it doesn't lessen what I felt about her or for her. And so a lot of our conversations, even in the beginning, were him grieving. I mean, it wasn't that he never talked about her. It wasn't that he never cried or said it sucks that she had to die that way or any he that was very much an active part of the beginning of our marriage. I mean of our dating, but it was not um it wasn't a distraction from what we were building at the time.
Mm-hmm. When, how far from the moment you guys dated up until marriage, how long did it take before he said, you know what, I'm ready to get married again?
When we started dating, I mean, he was very clear that he knew he wanted to marry again. I don't think he felt like I don't ever want to get married again. I think he was very clear that at some point when, whatever it is, whoever it is, that I do want to get married again. I desire to have that. I desire to share my life with someone. And that was very clear very early on in our dating process.
Okay. And how quickly did you guys get married after you dated?
So we met in November 2014 and we got married in April 2016. So the story progressed very quickly in a way that even took me by surprise. So we met in November. He lived in Ferguson at the time. So Ferguson is unfortunately known for the Michael Brown shooting back in 2014. And he lived not too far from the Quick Trip that became kind of the center of like the gatherings and the protests and things like that kind of caught on fire. He lived like 2 blocks from that. So he had a son, and he was kind of ready to move out of Ferguson kind of around that time. So by November 2014 is when we met. By February 2015, he moved to Atlanta. And he was very much, we had conversations, we talked about it. And he was like, I'm not coming to see if this will work. I'm not coming to see if I want to date you. He's like, I'm coming to with the intent to get you, to have you, to be with you forever. We went on a whirlwind tour of, I knew his sister, but, met his family and he met my family. And by July of 2015, we were engaged. And then in April 2016, we got married. So a little more than 14, 15, a little more than a year and a half from dating to marriage.
If you could describe him in one word, how would you describe him?
Oh my gosh, just one?
Okay,
Gary is not a one-word person.
Okay, use many words.
He is gregarious, but not in an obnoxious way. He's very much life of the parties makes it seem like he's like a party person, but he's very much like to bring life to a party, like to have conversation. He's also in sometimes good and sometimes frustrating ways a contrarian. He likes to play the devil's advocate in conversation. He likes to spark debate. He likes to have conversation. So he's not just going to go along with a topic or with an opinion just because, it sounds good, it makes sense. He's going to bring in the most impossible scenario and perspective, but it was all in an effort to have conversation and to dig more into the topic or whatever it is, or to get to know you. That was one thing that he told me when we were dating. I kind of held back on something that I was going to say. And he was like, I want to know you. He's like, I can handle who you are. I can't handle who you're not. So he was very much wanting to know, and it wasn't just me. He wanted to know people. He wanted to know what you think and how you felt. And in that way, because of that, he would spark conversation in any situation, and it would invigorate the space.
As far as the husband goes, because this also may help somebody who who wants to get married. So what qualities besides those that you've named did he possess that let you know, man, this is my husband?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one, he said some things and prayed, answered some prayers that I prayed that he wouldn't have known. Which one of them was, I want to be able to be myself. And hearing him say, I can handle who you are, like with me trying to hold back, thinking, oh, this is gonna turn him off, or this is gonna make him think something else for me. He was like, even if I don't like it, at least I know it's you. You know, if it's something that's you. And so him really exploring me and being able to want to get to know who I am as a person, despite how that might be different than him, was something that was really important for me. Um, we prayed together, and we were able to share the same faith without having to explain it to each other. We just got it because we grew up the same way in the same um, type of Christian background. And while that could be, that might not be important to everybody, for me, it was one less thing that I had to try to explain and fit into my life or things like that. So all of that made it easy. And then he did what he said he was going to do. I think that probably stood out a lot more at the beginning. Like I said, he was living in St. Louis at the time, and he said he wanted to come visit me and made plans, and he did what he said he was going to do. And I know that seems very like, well, yeah, that's what you do, but down to like planning dates and just taking care of things, he was intentional and followed through, which I'm not going to say in my dating life that wasn't always the case, but he was very much about his word and how he approached me and approached our relationship, that made it easy to rely on him or to trust him and to believe that he had my and our best interests at heart, and seeing how he did that with his son too.
Okay. And how long did you guys know each other before he passed away?
So we a total of 7 years. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah. Right at 7 years is how much time we had spent together. 5 of that was married. And it never seems like enough time. Like, looking at it now and thinking about it, it feels so long ago when we met, but it also feels very fresh and new. And I can recount specific things, and it just feels like it wasn't enough time. But I had, from the time I met him to the time he passed, right at 7 years.
Okay. What are some things, and I don't want to trigger you, so let me know.
No, I'm good.
What are some things that you enjoyed most about him? Like, what are some of the experiences that you said, man, we had a good time?
Man, just being able to laugh and create inside jokes. One of my favorite things is I'm a memory maker. I like to make memories. I like to do things with the people I love and care about, that allows us to create a new memory. Even if the thing that we're doing, the event we're going to, even if it sucks or fails or somehow not what we expected, it's a memory we have. And so being able to make memories with him and be able to like recount those memories, like, remember that time him and I went to this like improv thing that was not funny at all. And remember one time we went to this improv thing and we laughed about the fact that we thought it was going to be funny and it wasn't, right? So being able to recount those memories, and then being able to have that, I mean, now we call it tea spilling, like, ooh, and I'll tell you what happened. I got somebody to call and say, ooh, remember we was talking about so-and-so? I mean, I think that's the benefit of any married scenarios, that you have a built-in partner for everything. But we really enjoyed, we could talk for hours, almost to the point where it's like, okay, can I go to bed? You bringing up impossible scenarios and hypotheticals that aren't gonna ever happen, and it's time to go to sleep. He would do that, but we had an awesome time creating memories and having conversations and creating those inside jokes that were shared just between he and I.
Okay. So 7 years.
Yes.
7 years of knowing a person, 5 years of marriage. The day that he passed away,
yeah,
was his death something that was a ailment that it escalated to death, or was it something that it was like, I had no idea this was going to happen?
So a combination of both. So he lived with a heart condition that was diagnosed prior to me meeting him, but was relatively controlled and could be controlled with some efforts, on his part, diet, exercise. It wasn't going to cure it, but there was a plan to kind of make sure he could live with it better. Over the first year of our marriage, he was in and out of the hospital like 4 or 5 times dealing with this in long stints, like a week at a time. And by the time we got to when he went in the hospital in March of 2021, it was at the point where the doctors were like, okay, medication is not going to be enough for you. He was on several medications. There has to be more drastic measures, which included up to like having a heart transplant, which is not something you just go to the store and get, right? There's a process, there's things you have to do. There's a whole lot of things, but that's where the doctors wanted him to go. It was like, even before he got to this point, the doctors were like, you're going to need a heart transplant. We're not there yet, but that's what you're going to need. So in March of 2021, he was experiencing almost like a panic attack, but some type of distress that was causing him symptoms that we had seen before that indicated that he needed to go to the hospital. And at that time, I was very confident that this was nothing different than what had happened before with him going to the hospital. They manage it, they get him under control, send him back home, right? That was my expectation. And I believe it was his too. And when he got to the hospital, the complications and the things that were happening were like, okay, we have to do some more immediate remedying. That's not just medication. They needed to essentially do a surgery that was going to give him a heart pump that would prolong his life and give him a better quality of life. But even that was still a temporary measure. Like, this was a bridge to getting a heart transplant. So as he was in the hospital dealing with this, weeks were going by. The goal was to have that surgery relatively quickly when he got into the hospital, but there were a lot of complications. His heart wasn't strong enough. He even ended up getting an infection, and there were a number of things over a course of 3 or 4 weeks that were making it difficult or impossible for him to get this heart surgery. Mm-hmm. There came a point in time where I pulled the doctors aside and said, he can't live in the hospital. Like, what you're doing is sustaining his life, but he can't live in the hospital forever. So what's the plan? What does this mean? And they told me, we're not there yet, but eventually this will have to stop because, like you said, he can't live in the hospital. And this wasn't something that you go home with. The medications he was on, so that's something you go home with. And so after about a week, and after he had tried and some of his organs were starting to shut down, they made a decision. And he was fully aware of, he was conscious. My husband was never unconscious. He was fully aware that there was going to come a point in time where they were going to have to stop, and it was just going to be up to his body to do the work. And unfortunately, his heart was not capable of sustaining life. So it wasn't expected in the beginning because we thought he was coming, but near the end, it was expected.
Was he still able? I know he was still conscious, but was he still able to communicate with you?
Yes, he communicated. This is the part of his personality that was very not joking, matter of fact in some ways. At the very end, we got time for family to come. We found out early in the day, the doctors were like, we're going to stop the medications today. Gave time for my family to get in. This was during still kind of active COVID, so they let people come into the hospital to be and see him. And he was able to communicate. He was in and out of sleep, but when people would come, he would say words. And when I tell you the very end, when the chaplain came in and said, Okay, do you have anything you want to say to your family? And because we had talked about death so much, death was such a part of our relationship, and after what happens after dying and all that, because that was so much part of our relationship, he said very matter of factly, what you want me to say? Get on with it. Like, he was very much like, I know what's about to happen and I'm at peace. Let's do this, essentially. He was very, very clear about what was going to happen. And I think because he had the chance to say bye to everybody or that had come, I think he was at peace. Yeah.
And I don't think I asked before. I know you were 40, but how old was he?
He was 50.
He was 50.
Yeah.
The mental process, because when a person is dying, sometimes, like, especially as a wife, you don't initially process like everyone else, because it's like, I got funeral planning, I got this to plan, I got that to do. So you're busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
The business dies out.
Yeah.
You are at a home you guys once shared, and you have to go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that look like?
So thankfully, for the first 30 days, I was not alone at all. My mom came the day when we knew that they were going to stop the medication. My mom came immediately. So she was there. My best friend came and stayed. So I had two services. I had one in Atlanta and one in St. Louis. And so my best friend stayed with me until I went back to St. Louis. And then I think I came back home and another friend came with me and stayed with me for a little while. And then when she went home, I think I was home for maybe 2 or 3 days or maybe a week. And then I went to my parents and stayed with my parents for 3 weeks. Okay. So it wasn't until I got back from being with my mom that it was kind of like, okay, I'm by myself. And I don't know, the nighttime was the hardest. During the day, I mean, I was still working and things like that. Nighttime was the hardest because that's when the remembering and it's the quietest. And I had a wealth of support. I knew I could call people at any moment. I knew I could cry at any time, but sometimes it's not convenient to call people at 2 a.m. Grief is not convenient. Death is not convenient. And so, it was, and I won't even just say it was nighttime and sleep time. It was dark time that made it hardest, because there was a safety in having him here. There was a comfort in knowing that somebody was going to protect me. Not that people were breaking in or anything like that, but just this idea of he's here and I can relax. And I didn't have that. So going to sleep was harder. That was probably the hardest times, was nighttime.
How long did it take you to say, you know what, I'm finally starting to feel like me again? Like, how long did your grieving last? Or is it over? Or
no, it's not. It's not over. Grief in itself doesn't end. And because I had what I had from him, watching him grieve, is that it's going to come and go in waves. And it's not even come and go. It's going to be different sensations and feelings and emotions experienced at any point in time. And my goal was not to get over it. My goal was to feel everything. My goal was not to not grieve or not be sad or not cry. My goal was to go through the process. And there were times where there's something I said, joy and grief are intimately entwined. So there were points in times very early on that I was happy and laughing and joking very early on. But there were other times where maybe I should have been laughing and joking and crying that I was crying, And my goal was not to make the times match. My goal was just to feel what I was feeling and be open to people about it and to share what I was feeling so that people understand right now it's okay for me to laugh. And it doesn't make me a bad person because my husband died, I don't know, 2 months ago. And now I'm out here laughing and having a good time. And it doesn't make me depressed because I'm having a good time, but also I'm crying because my husband's not here. So being able to understand all of those things never made me feel like I wasn't myself. It never made me feel like I wasn't being honest and true and authentic. It made me feel like that's what I was doing, you know? And I think the parts and the times when I felt like I was less triggered by a memory where tears would fall would make me feel like, okay, I have a little different strength, but I never felt like I had to be strong and not feel either.
Okay. So you had your husband basically was the person that it's like almost like foresight. He gave you the strength to get over his death. What advice would you give to someone that may be going through something similar to you but doesn't have a support system, or maybe anyone who's lost a partner at such a young age?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's no manual on grieving. There's no right or wrong way. I think everybody has a way, but you have to think about what do you want in the end and how do you get there. So, you know, for me, very early on, it was I want to be able to live my life. It will be tragic for me to die with him. It will be unfortunate for me to feel like I cannot live my life in a way that shows forward progress because of his death. And it doesn't mean that I was not sad or wish that he was here. It was that, but I saw what he did. And not even just with the idea of getting married again, but the idea of continuing to live his life. And that does so much more. That gave me much more, gave me something to look forward to. I still had to work. I still have to keep a roof over my head and all of that. But I also allowed myself to have those moments at work. I had no problems crying at work. I had no problem telling my boss, I just can't feel, I can't do this today. I had no problem being transparent about what I was feeling, to demystify the idea that I'm strong and stone faced and then I come home and break down and cry. Mm-mm. I am going to experience this and I'm going to be transparent about it. And what I found out the most is that when I allow myself to have those moments, wherever they were, whether it was, I had one at the dry cleaners, I had one in the drive-through, wherever I had those moments, when I allowed myself to have them, I found they didn't last as long as I thought because I wasn't holding it. So it was like, if the tears are coming, they're coming, I'm fine. And maybe minutes later, I'd be done. And not done, but like I'd be able to function or, you know, kind of move forward. So those moments come, not as frequently now, but they still come. And I don't think they'll ever not come. It is, the goal is not to forget. As a matter of fact, I had to tell Gary this about his first wife. He was saying, I don't want this to be a problem. I don't want to cry every time I think of her. And I said, you won't. I said, but also she was your wife. You had a family. How dare you think that you should forget her or that it should not affect you ever again? And I think me being open and honest with him allowed him to grieve and then have fewer of those moments. And that's what I took from him. Like, if you just grieve, if you just have the moments, you can not get through them quicker as to not have them, but you can get through them.
Mm-hmm. I have a question regarding that as well. You seem like you were extremely supportive in helping and allowing him to grieve over his first wife. I've noticed in some instances where women or men or whomever will be jealous of someone's dead spouse. So now instead of allowing that person to grieve, they're shaming them for grieving because they're competing with the memory of their dead spouse. What advice would you give to someone that says, I'm not trying to be jealous, but I am? Like, what advice would you give to that person?
I don't know if I have advice. I have my experience.
Right.
And I think because I think that was something that was new for me. I didn't learn that from anybody. No, but I never experienced anybody that had lost a spouse that was definitely not young. Everybody that I knew lost their spouse was grandparent age. You know what I'm saying? Where it's old and you don't think they're gonna marry again anyway, right? Somebody that's you don't think they will. I'm not saying they can't, but you don't think about that. So this was new territory for me. And I think the thing that he said that made sense, and the thing that I saw was that she's not coming back, and competing with her memory is no different than competing with the memory of him losing a parent or a sibling or a friend. You're not going to stop. The goal isn't to never remember. He never made me feel like I was competing with her. He never made me feel like he was comparing me to her. He never made me feel like he was just trying to continue his marriage with her by just marrying somebody else. He lost somebody he loved and was in a relationship with, and there was nothing for me to compete with or be jealous of, because I wouldn't expect him to forget his mother when she passed, which she did after we got married. She passed. But for me to say, don't remember your mother would be egregious, right? I think it was two ways. He never made me feel like I was competing, and I just never felt like I had to honor her memory, because the only way I had him to love was because he lost. So that's the place I had to kind of put that in.
The compassion that you show is remarkable. And so I'm just blown away by it. Because of who you are, it wasn't anger, and that's all that also of loving from a good place. So I just wow. What advice would you give to someone who have a friend or family member who's going through something that you went through, on how they can be more supportive to their family member that's going through this, or their friend?
Yeah. First of all, there are no words that are going to take grief away. There are no words that are going to take the pain away. There are no words that are going to change the situation. And so it's okay to sit with a person without trying to fix it with words. Your presence is oftentimes what's needed, which in the allowing of the expression of whatever emotion the person is going through is probably one of the best ways to support somebody. So if someone is crying, if they have a moment, if they break out in tears, don't say don't cry, don't say be strong, don't say it'll be okay, because none of those things feel like they're making the situation better. Just let them cry. Just let them talk. Just let them be in that space, and that's okay. It is innate human response to want to fix, to want to comfort, to want to say something, because we want to make it better. We don't want you to cry. We don't want our friends to cry. We don't want people who we love to hurt. But sometimes just your presence is enough. That's one way. The other thing is, very early on, I hate the question. No, not the question. I hate the statement, let me know if you need anything. I think that is the easiest way to not be asked to do anything, because someone who's grieving, and not even just grieving, anybody who's going through a tough time, to say, let me know if you need anything, puts the onus on that person to have to think about something that you can do for them. I think one thing that you can do to support someone who's grieving or going through a tough time is kind of think about what is something that you see that's going missing or unknown or undone. Can I, and offer that to the person? Can I bring you a meal? Can I come clean your house? Can I take care of your dog? If you give them options, it gives two things. It gives them some things to consider that they need help with, and it shows them what you are capable of doing. So a lot of times we say, let me know if you need anything. And then the person who's going through the tough time of grieving could go. I'm not saying they do, could go, you know what? My mom needs a plane ticket to get here. Can you pay a plane ticket to get here? And now you like, blah, 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 because I don't have plane ticket money, right? I thought maybe you meant, could I come sit with you or something? If you offer what you can do, then it gives the person a thing to pick from. Or if you say, that's one way, or you can ask the person, what is something that you can't do right now because of this situation? What is something that is gone unnoticed or undone because of this? And again, that gives them something to think about. Or just offer, like I said, can I come wash your car? Can I clean your house? Can I give you money to clean your house? Can I offer the things? Because it is too overwhelming for somebody to have to navigate 12 different people asking them, just let me know if you need something, and then not following up. So I think there are more, but the two things in a nutshell is, don't let the person have their feelings. Do not try to quell them with words, and then offer things that you can do that are within your possibility or within your capabilities that can support the person and take it off their plate, whether it's bringing meals, washing cars, watching their kids, whatever the case may be.
Okay, so I'm going to circle back. You kind of talked about having to return back to work after dealing with the grief process. First of all, how long did you take off from work after that?
So yes, I was able to take off a whole month. I probably could have taken more, but I felt like from the moment of his passing and it was going into Memorial Day, like pretty much the whole month of May, I took off. But also we were still working 100% remote from home. And so that allowed me a little bit more, like I didn't feel like I had to go back into the hustle bustle of being in front of people. And I was able to work from home at my parents' house. So that gave me a lot of support as well. So yeah, I had about a month off of work.
Okay. And also, how did you communicate? Maybe you were having a bad day. I'm having an off day. I'm not able to do XYZ. How did you communicate that with your managers? And how important is it to have an understanding manager?
Well, I think it's definitely very important to have an understanding manager or supervisor, whoever you report to. I just had been very transparent every step of the way. So I was able to say, I'm having a grief day. If I'm here or if I'm doing this just to do it or to be here, it's not going to be good. So you might as well let me go, or let me, I was just very clear about that. It wasn't every day that I was having those moments. I was able to maybe have a moment. I have my own office, so maybe I could just like have a moment and be like, okay, I'm good. I don't have to necessarily share that with my job. I could close the door. But in the moments, in the times where I woke up and was like, I just have no strength, which was a few times, not every week, I was just able to communicate that. And I took in consideration what I had to do that day. Maybe it was a day I had no meetings, maybe it was a day that I, I could postpone this thing another day or two, So I took all that into consideration. I didn't abuse it, but my job was very supportive. Even when I took off, they were like, take as much time as you need, work is going to be here. And that was good.
Okay. And this is the final question. With you going through the grief process, and I know he still had family and other people, friends who loved him, how were you able to support them through your own grieving? How were you there for them?
So one of his good friends, she was a coworker turned sister. Loved her to death. He loved her. She loved him. I loved her. She was very much a good part of his life in our lives. And one day we talked. I think we were texting, or maybe we were talking, and she started crying, and she said, I shouldn't be crying to you about this. You lost your husband. And I told her, I said, I'm not the only one who lost him. You did too. Everybody that knew him lost him. I do not own grieving Gary. I'm not the only person. So yes, grieve him. And I said, and when people share that with me, it lets me know that they love him too. Talking about him, sharing what you remember, sharing what you miss makes me feel less alone. It makes me feel like it makes me feel less like I'm the only one going through this. So even if the memory or the things that you share are gonna make me cry, tell me. I want to hear it. I don't want to feel like I'm the only one working to not just keep his memory alive, but grieving him. I don't want to, because it does feel like that in life. Well, after the funeral and after all that, everybody's lives go on. And here you are like, how do I go on when my life has been disrupted? And so being able to have other people share those stories with me and me be able to say, yes, I know, I hear you. It's okay. Let's talk about him. That helped me. So my support of other people and my being able to share what I was going through and how I was feeling, I feel like let other people be just as open and honest and vulnerable with me. I didn't say, I don't have time for your grief, or I lost my husband. Who cared? He was your friend. He was my husband. I never said that. I said, yes, you too. You lost him too. And it's okay to share that with me.
And that changed the dynamic of everything.
I don't think it changed the dynamic in the sense that people were open and willing to share with me, that they didn't feel like they had to be strong or not cry in front of me. You know, they didn't want to tip me. No, share, talk, tell me, so I can support you too, because I am not the only one who lost him.
We're going to wrap things up. Did you have any last remarks or anything you wanted to say before we wrap things up?
Yeah, grief of all kinds grieving, you can grieve anything, the loss of a job or the loss of a friendship. There are many ways to experience grief. And I think the biggest thing is to go through it and go and experience the emotions, because grieving well doesn't mean getting over it, but it means going through a healthy process. Find resources. There are so many resources on, if you're grieving a mother or parent, or grieving a spouse, like there are support groups, but you have to determine what you want, not just from your grief, but for your life. What is the outcome? Do you want to get to a place where you can engage in that same type of relationship again? Do you want to get to a place where you are wanting to enjoy hobbies again, whatever the case may be? The other thing, and this might be more for people who are still married or want to get married, is I didn't have to rediscover myself, because I still had my independence in understanding of me in my marriage. And I told Gary, we had this conversation early in our marriage, and I told him, you are my everything. You're not my only thing. And because of that, I already had all the support systems in place. My friends were always my friends, my parents, my hobbies. I didn't have to rebuild my life, and it wasn't that I lived a separate life, is that we intertwined our lives in a way that allowed for independence at appropriate times and at the right times, which made his death, yes, I grieved it, but I wasn't re-picking up my life. I jumped right back into the things that I was already doing. So being able to have not a in case he dies or in case she dies plan, but just being able to have a life and being able to live your life in a way that is not like you're having to pick up the pieces. We often hear this with people who get married and have kids, like, my life is all about my kids. No, you have to have a life of your own. because those kids are going to grow up one day, right? You don't want to have to rediscover yourself. So being able to go through the process, being able to keep independence about yourself, not in light of death, but because you are an independent person, you are a whole individual, and being able to utilize the resources that are available that help you move forward, not move on, but move forward.
Wow, this is going to help so many people, even in the, because I didn't even think about that. Dating with intention, but also knowing who you are prior to dating. Brandi, I may need to have you back on this because yeah, we're gonna talk. Like, I'm about to end this live, but I need to talk to you.
Yeah.